The dragon had stopped counting the years after the first 1,000. Time meant nothing in the darkness beneath the mountain. There was only the cold stone, the hum of the chains, and the slow dying of his fire. His name was, and he was the last of his kind. 3,000 years ago, the Galactic Dominion had come for him. They came with ships that blocked out the stars and weapons forged in the hearts of dying suns. They called themselves the Keepers of Order, the Rulers of Peace, but knew what they truly were. They were afraid. Dragons had roamed the galaxy since before the Dominion existed. They had built empires of fire and freedom, protected the weak, burned the cruel. The elder species of the Dominion could not allow such power to exist outside their control, so they made a plan. First, they poisoned the dragon eggs, still remembered finding his children, cold and still in their nests. He remembered the sound of his own screaming, a sound that shattered moons. Then they came for the adults. One by one, the dragons fell. Some were killed. Others were captured and experimented upon until death was a mercy. Fought back. He burned their fleets, destroyed their stations, made them pay for every drop of dragon blood they had spilled. But in the end, there were too many of them and only one of him. They could not kill him. His scales were too strong, his fire too hot. So they did something worse. They chained him with bonds forged from collapsed stars, locked with quantum seals that no claw could break. They buried him beneath a mountain on a dying world called, and they left him there to rot. The Dominion moved on. They conquered new worlds, enslaved new species, spread their cold order across the galaxy. They forgot about the dragon beneath the mountain. After all, what threat was a chained beast? Lay in the darkness and felt his fire grow dimmer with each passing century. He stopped hopping for rescue. He stopped dreaming of revenge. He simply existed, a relic of a forgotten age, waiting for an end that would never come. Then the humans arrived. The colony ship was called. It carried 500 souls seeking a new home among the stars. They were simple people, farmers and builders and dreamers, looking for a place where they could live in peace. They never found that place. Something went wrong during their journey. The navigation system failed, the engines broke down, and they fell from the sky like a wounded bird. It crashed on a planet that appeared on no maps, a world the Dominion had abandoned long ago. Only 47 people survived. Among them was a man named. He was 34 years old, with calloused hands and a quiet voice. Back on Earth, he had been a blacksmith, one of the last people who still worked with hammer and fire in an age of machines. He had joined the colony mission because he wanted to build something new, something that would last. Now he stood in the wreckage of his dreams and tried not to despair. The survivors gathered what they could from the broken ship: food, medicine, tools, anything that might help them stay alive. Their captain, a woman named, organized them into groups and assigned tasks. She was calm and steady, the kind of leader people needed in a crisis. But even she could not hide the truth. They were stranded on an unknown world with limited supplies and no way to call for help. Unless something changed, they would all die here. Refused to accept that. While others focused on the camp, he explored the surrounding area. The planet was harsh but not lifeless. There were caves in the nearby mountains, places where they might find shelter from the constant ash storms that swept across the land. On his 7th day of exploration, found the tunnel. It was hidden behind a fall of rocks, barely visible unless you knew where to look. The opening was large enough for a person to walk through, and cool air flowed from within. Lit his torch and stepped inside. The tunnel went deep into the mountain. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Someone had carved this path long ago. Walked for hours, following the gentle slope downward, until the tunnel opened into a cavern so vast that his torch could not reach the ceiling. And there, in the center of that impossible space, lay the dragon. Stopped breathing. He had heard stories of dragons as a child, old tales from Earth, legends of serpents and fire, of creatures that guarded treasures and tested heroes. He had always thought they were just stories. The creature before him was larger than its scales were the color of dying embers, deep red fatting to black. Great chains wrapped around its body, binding its wings, its legs, its tail. The chains glowed with a faint blue light, humming with power that could feel in his bones. The dragon's eyes were closed, thought it might be dead. Then it spoke. "You are small." The voice was like thunder trapped underground, deep and rumbling and ancient. The dragon's eyes opened, revealing orbs of molten gold that reflect its tiny form. "Too small to be a conqueror," the dragon continued. "Too weak to be an assassin. What are you, little creature?" His heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct told him to run, to flee from this impossible being and never look back. But something made him stay. Perhaps it was the way the dragon looked at him, not with hunger or hatred, but with something that might have been curiosity. Or perhaps it was the chains. Had spent his life working with metal. He understood the weight of iron, the bite of steel, the way bonds could break a spirit long before they broke a body. The chains around this dragon were not just restraints. They were punishment. They were cruelty made solid. "My name is," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I am a blacksmith." The dragon stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, it laughed. The sound shook dust from the ceiling and made its teeth rattle. "A blacksmith," said. "The Dominion bound me with chains forged from the hearts of collapsed stars, locked with seals that bend the laws of reality itself. And you, little blacksmith, what do you think you can do?" Looked at the chains. He looked at his hands and strong from years at the forge. He thought about his people dying slowly in the camp above, about the colony that would never be built, about all the dreams that had crashed with the... Then he smiled. "Those chains," he said, "are just metal with an attitude problem, and I have been solving metal problems my whole life." His golden eyes widened. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had surprised him. "You would try to free me. You do not know what I am. You do not know what I have done." "I know what they did to you," replied. "I can see it in your eyes. 3,000 years in the dark, alone and forgotten. Nobody deserves that. I could burn you where you stand." "You could, but you will not." "How can you be so certain?" Shrugged. "Because you are still talking to me. Because you are lonely. And because I think you want to believe that someone in this galaxy still cares enough to try." The dragon said nothing. The chains hummed in the silence. Turned and began walking back toward the tunnel. "I need to get my tools, and I need to tell the others. This might take a while." "Wait," called. "What is your price? What do you want in return?" Paused at the edge of the light. He looked back at the chained dragon, the last of a murdered race, and felt something stir in his chest. Something that felt like purpose. "I want nothing," he said. "Freedom is not a transaction, it is just the right thing to do." Then he disappeared into the darkness, leaving alone with a feeling he had not experienced in 3,000 years. Hope returned to the camp at sunset. The sky above was the color of bruised fruit, purple and orange and angry red. Ash fell like snow, covering everything in a thin gray blanket. The survivors had built shelters from the wreckage of the... They were crude structures, barely enough to keep out the wind, but they were something. Found standing near the central fire, staring at it with tired eyes. "You were gone a long time," she said without looking up. "Find anything useful?" Hesitated. "How did you tell someone you had found a dragon?" "I found something," he said carefully. "But I need to show you. I need to show everyone." Finally looked at him. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray in her hair. She had been a captain for 20 years, had seen more of the galaxy than most people could imagine. But the crash had broken something in her. Could see it in the way she held herself, in the weight that pressed down on her shoulders. "We do not have time for mysteries. We have maybe 2 months of food left. The water recyclers are failing. If we do not find a solution soon, we are all dead. I know, that is why you need to see this. Something in his voice made her pause. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Show me. Led her to the tunnel. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing off the smooth walls. When they reached the cavern, stopped so suddenly that almost walked into her. What? She whispered. What is that? Lifted his head, his golden eyes fixed on the newcomer, and took an involuntary step backward. Another human, the dragon rumbled. You are bringing guests now, Blacksmith. This is, said. She leads our people, this is. He has been imprisoned here for 3,000 years. His mouth opened and closed several times. She was not a woman who was often lost for words, but there was no training in the galaxy that prepared you for meeting a dragon. The Dominion, she finally managed. The Galactic Dominion did this. You know them. Everyone knows them. They rule everything. They control the trade routes, the habitable worlds, the flow of information. We were supposed to be settling one of their approved colonies before. She trailed off, looking at the chains. They chained you for 3,000 years. Yes. Why? His eyes darkened. Because I refused to kneel. Because I fought for those they wanted to enslave. Because dragons do not bow to tyrants. Turn 2, her face was pale but her voice was steady. You want to free him? Yes. This is insane. The Dominion chained him for a reason. What if he destroys us the moment he is free? What if freeing him brings the Dominion down on our heads? The Dominion does not know we are here, replied. They abandoned this planet long ago. As for what we'll do when he is free, he looked at the dragon. That is his choice to make. But I have looked into his eyes. I have seen what 3,000 years of chains have done to him. He is not our enemy. You cannot know that. No, but I believe it. Was silent for a long time. She looked at the chains that bound him, at the scars that marked his scales. She thought about her people dying slowly in the camp above, about the hopelessness that grew heavier with each passing day. Finally she sighed. Even if I agreed, how would we do this? Those chains, that technology, it is far beyond anything we have. That, said with a small smile, is where I need help. Was the colony's chief engineer. She was young, only 26, with messy hair and oil stains on her clothes. Before the crash, she had maintained the systems. Now she spent her days trying to salvage anything useful from the wreckage. When brought her to the cavern, she did not run. She did not scream. She walked right up to the nearest chain and started examining it with the focus of someone solving a puzzle. Fascinating, she muttered. The alloy is like nothing I have seen. The energy signature suggests quantum locking mechanisms, multiple redundancies, fail-safes within fail-safes. Whoever built this really did not want it opened. Can you open it? Asked. Turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright with challenge. I have no idea, but I am absolutely going to try. They began working that night. Set up a forge near the cavern entrance, using parts salvaged from the. Brought her tools and her endless curiosity. Other survivors joined them slowly, drawn by rumors of what lay beneath the mountain. Some came to help. Others came just to see the dragon with their own eyes. Watched them all. He watched the humans argue about the best approach to the chains. He watched them fail and try again and fail again. He watched them work through the night, refusing to rest, refusing to give up. He did not understand them. Why do you do this? He asked one evening. Was hammering at a piece of metal, shaping it into a tool that might fit the chain's locking mechanism. His arms were tired and his back ached, but he did not stop. Do what? Help me? You gain nothing from this. Your people are dying. Your resources are limited. Every hour you spend here is an hour not spent on your own survival. Why waste it on me? Stopped hammering. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up at the dragon. "When I was young," he said, "my father told me a story. He said that long ago on Earth there was a man walking along a beach. The beach was covered with starfish that had been washed up by the tide, thousands of them dying in the sun. The man started picking them up one by one and throwing them back into the ocean. Another man came along and laughed at him. 'There are too many,' he said. 'You cannot save them all. It does not matter.' The first man picked up another starfish and threw it into the water. 'It matters to this one,' he said. Was silent. 'I cannot save everyone,' continued. 'I cannot fix the or call for rescue or make food appear from nothing, but I can try to help you. And that matters. Maybe not to the galaxy, maybe not to the Dominion, but it matters to me, and it matters to you.' The dragon stared at the blacksmith for a long time. His golden eyes were unreadable. 'You are a strange creature.' 'So I have been told.' Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The work was slow and frustrating. For every step forward, there were 3 steps back. The chains were designed by minds far greater than human, using technology that seemed like magic. But humans were stubborn. Decoded the first quantum lock on the 47th day. Forged a key that could turn it on the 63rd. On the 91st day, working together through the night, they broke the first chain. The sound echoed through the cavern like thunder. His left front leg moved freely for the first time in 3. He flexed his claws, watching them respond to his will, and something broke inside him. He wept. Great tears of molten gold rolled down his scales and sizzled against the stone floor. Stood before him, covered in soot and burns, exhausted beyond measure, and smiled. 3 down, he said, 14 to go. Looked at this small human, this blacksmith who had refused to accept the impossible. He thought about all the mighty warriors who had failed to free him, all the powerful beings who had not even tried. And he made a promise to himself. Whatever happened next, whatever the future held, he would not forget this debt. He would not forget the man who had looked at a chained dragon and seen not a monster, but a person in need of help. 'Thank you,' whispered. It was the first time he had said those words in 3,000 years. Nodded. 'We are not done yet. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start on the next one.' He walked back toward his forge, already planning the next step. Behind him, closed his eyes and dreamed for the first time since his imprisonment began. He dreamed of freedom. He dreamed of fire. And he dreamed of a future where dragons and humans walked together under open skies. It was a good dream. The Dominion detected the energy release 3 days after the first chain broke. Somewhere in their vast empire, an alarm that had been silent for suddenly screamed to life. Ancient monitors flickered awake. Forgotten protocols activated. The dragon was stirring. Admiral of the fleet received the report with cold satisfaction. He was a creature of crystal and light, his body sharp angles and glowing edges. His species had hunted dragons since before the Dominion existed. They had been the ones to capture all those centuries ago. And now it seemed someone was trying to free him. 'Send 3 ships,' ordered. 'Find out what is happening on. If the beast has somehow escaped, destroy it. If it still lives in chains, destroy whatever fool is attempting this madness.' The ships departed within the hour. On the humans knew nothing of the fleet racing toward them. They continued their work, breaking chains one by one. 8 were gone now. Could stand for the first time in 3,000 years. He could stretch his wings, though they remained bound by the remaining chains. He could breathe, and when he did, small flames flickered at the corners of his mouth. His fire was returning. Was the first to spot the ships. He was a former soldier, a man with gray at his temples and scars on his arms. He had been standing watch on the ridge above the camp when the lights appeared in the sky. 'Contact,' he shouted, running down the slope. 3 vessels coming in fast. Chaos erupted. The survivors scrambled for cover, grabbing children and supplies and whatever else they could carry. Tried to maintain order, but There was nowhere to hide. They were 47 humans on a dead planet with no weapons and no defenses. Did not run, he went to the cavern. "They are coming for you," he told. "3 ships. I think they are from the Dominion." The dragon's eyes blazed with sudden fury. I can smell their ships from here. Crystal hunters. They were the ones who chained me." "Can you fight them?" "With 8 chains still holding me." "No. My fire is weak, my movement limited. If they reach this cavern, they will finish what they started 3,000 years ago." Looked at the chains, he looked at his forge, he made a decision. "Then we buy you time." He found working on one of the remaining locks. Her hair was wild, her eyes red from lack of sleep, but she was still focused, still determined. The ships said, "Can you stop them?" Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Stop warships? With what? We have nothing. No weapons, no shields, nothing but scrap metal and desperation. You turned nothing into tools that could break chains forged by gods. You are the person I know. Think, what can we do?" Was silent for a moment, then something changed in her eyes. A spark appeared, dangerous and bright. "This power core," she said slowly. "It is damaged but not dead. If I could redirect the energy, focus it through the right channels." She started walking, then running. Get me everyone who can lift heavy things. We have maybe 6 hours before those ships land." What followed was madness. The survivors worked like people possessed. Under's direction, they stripped parts from the crashed ship and carried them up the mountain. They dug trenches, laid cables, and constructed devices that looked more like art projects than weapons. "What is this?" asked, staring at a twisted piece of metal that was attaching to the ship's power core. "A surprise," replied. "I cannot build a weapon that can destroy a warship, but I can build something that will make them very unhappy." Organize the fighters. There were only 12 of them, men and women who had some combat experience. They had no guns, only tools and improvised clubs. Against warriors, they would be slaughtered in seconds. But they refused to hide. "We are not soldiers," told them as the ships grew larger in the sky. "We are colonists, farmers, builders, but we are also human, and humans do not surrender. We do not give up. We fight until we cannot fight anymore, and then we fight some more." They landed at dawn. Their ships touched down in the valley below the camp, elegant vessels of crystal and steel. Hatches opened, and warriors emerged, tall beings of sharp edges and cold light. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Their commander stepped forward. He was smaller than the others, older, with cracks running through his crystalline form. His name was not important. To the humans, he was simply the enemy. "We know the dragon lives," he called out, his voice echoing across the valley. "Surrender him and we may let some of you survive. Resist and you will all die." Stood at the top of the ridge, looking down at the alien force. Behind her, 46 people waited for her decision. She thought about running. She thought about negotiating. She thought about all the sensible options that a good leader should consider. Then she thought about, alone in the dark for 3,000 years. She thought about, who had looked at an impossible task and simply started working. She thought about what kind of people they wanted to be. "You want the dragon," she shouted back. "Come and take him." The commander made a gesture. His warriors began to advance. "And press the button." The first explosion caught them completely by surprise. The ground beneath their feet erupted in fire and shrapnel, sending crystal bodies flying. They had expected primitive humans, not minefields. The second explosion was even worse. Had turned this damaged power core into a directed energy weapon. It was crude, unstable, and would probably only work once. But when it fired, it carved a line of destruction through the ranks that killed a dozen warriors instantly. "Now," screamed, and the humans charged. It was not a proper battle. It was chaos and desperation and screaming fury. The humans had no chance against technology, but they had surprise and rage, and the knowledge that there was nowhere left to run. Fought with a metal rod, swinging it like a club. He broke one warrior's crystalline arm before taking a wound to his side that should have killed him. Grabbed a fallen weapon and figured out how to fire it through pure instinct. Even the farmers fought, throwing rocks and tackling enemies twice their size. And in the cavern beneath the mountain, worked. He could hear the battle above him. He could hear the screams and explosions, the sound of his people fighting and dying. Every part of him wanted to run up there and help. But he had a different job. His hammer fell on the ninth chain. The quantum lock resisted, then shattered. The chain dropped away. "Two more," he gasped. His hands were bleeding, his vision blurring from exhaustion. Just two more. Above, the commander had reached the ridge. His warriors were scattered, dead or wounded, but he still stood. His weapon was aimed at its head. "Enough," he said. "You have fought well for primitives, but this ends now. Where is the dragon?" Smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Behind you." The commander turned. Emerged from the tunnel like a nightmare made flesh. Two chains still bound him, but his fire had returned. His wings were spread wide, blocking out the sky. His eyes blazed with 3,000 years of imprisoned fury. "Hello, little crystal," the dragon said. "Do you remember me?" The commander fired his weapon. The blast hit his chest and did nothing. The dragon laughed, and that laugh was the last thing the commander ever heard. Fire poured from his jaws. Not the weak flicker of his imprisonment, but true, hot enough to melt steel, bright enough to turn night into day. The commander vanished in an instant. In the valley below, the surviving warriors looked up at the dragon and ran. Two of their ships managed to lift off and flee into the sky. The third was too slow. Fire caught it 50 meters off the ground. The explosion lit up the dawn like a second sunrise. When it was over, the humans stood in stunned silence. The valley was scorched black. Crystal bodies lay scattered across the landscape. Above them, a dragon spread his wings and roared his triumph to the heavens. Emerged from the tunnel, swaying on his feet, caught him before he fell. "Two chains left," he murmured, "just two more." Landed beside him. The dragon's enormous head lowered until his golden eye was level with his face. "You fight," he said slowly, "like you have already won." Managed a weak smile. "We fight like we have nothing to lose. That is the human way." The dragon considered this. Then very gently, he nudged the blacksmith with his snout. "Rest now, little human. You have earned it. Tomorrow we finish what we started." Nodded and let his eyes close. Around him, his people began tending to the wounded, gathering the dead, preparing for whatever came next. They had won the first battle. But they all knew the war was just beginning. News traveled faster than light in the Dominion's empire. Within days, every corner of the galaxy knew what had happened on. A dragon lived. The last of his kind, thought to be broken and forgotten, had burned warriors and destroyed one of their ships. And humans had freed him. The Dominion reacted with fury. Admiral assembled a war fleet of 30 vessels, the largest gathering of ships in centuries. He swore before the Council of Elders that he would finish what his ancestors had started. The dragon would die. The humans would die. Itself would burn. But the Dominion was not the only power watching. In the dark corners of the galaxy, species that had been conquered and forgotten heard the news. Refugees whispered to each other in hidden camps. Slaves passed messages in the depths of mining colonies. A dragon lived. Humans had freed him. Hope spread like wildfire. The first ship arrived at 3 weeks after the battle. It was a small vessel, battered and barely functional, carrying 12 members of a species called the. They were soft-bodied beings with many limbs, gentle creatures who had once been poets and artists before the Dominion enslaved them. Their leader approached with trembling limbs. "We heard the stories," she said. "We had to see if they were true, if there is truly a place where the Dominion's chains can be broken." looked at their scared eyes and hopeful faces. She looked at, still bound by two chains but growing stronger every day. She looked at her people, wounded and exhausted but alive. "You are welcome here," she said, "for as long as you need." More ships came. A dozen at first, then scores. Species the Dominion had crushed centuries ago, peoples whose very names had been erased from history. They came with nothing but their lives and their stories and their desperate need to believe in something. Became their voice. She was young, barely 20 years old, born on the during its long journey through the stars. She had grown up hearing tales of old Earth, of dragons and heroes, of people who fought against impossible odds. Now she found herself living in one of those stories. She learned the languages of the refugees. She listened to their histories, their grievances, their dreams. She helped them find places in the growing settlement, resolved disputes, built connections between species that had never met before. "You have a gift," told her one evening. The dragon was resting near the forge, watching as worked on the 11th chain. "You see the heart of things. You understand what people need even when they cannot say it themselves." Shrugged, I just listen. Everyone wants the same things: safety, dignity, a chance to be free. Simple desires, but the Dominion has spent denying them. That is why they must be stopped. Can they be stopped? They have ruled the galaxy for so long. His eyes flickered with inner fire. Every empire falls eventually. The Dominion is strong, but strength built on fear is brittle. One crack and the whole structure crumbles. And we are that crack. The dragon smiled, showing teeth as long as swords. We are a beginning. What happens next depends on what we build here. Broke the 11th chain on a clear morning when both of its moons were visible in the sky. Wings spread fully for the first time in 3, casting shadows across the settlement like passing clouds. He rose into the air with a roar that echoed off the mountains. The refugees stopped what they were doing and watched in wonder as the dragon climbed higher and higher, a creature of legend made real. When he finally landed, there were tears in his golden eyes. "One more chain," said. His hands were now marked by months of brutal work. His hair had gone gray at the temples, but his smile was as bright as ever. "One more chain and you will be free." "I do not know what I will do," admitted. "For so long I dreamed only of revenge, of burning the Dominion until nothing remained. But now—" he looked at the settlement, at the humans and refugees who had built something from nothing. "Now I think perhaps there are other dreams worth having." There always are. The Dominion fleet arrived 3 days later. 30 warships dropped out of hyperspace above, their weapons charged and ready. Admiral broadcast his ultimatum across all frequencies, his crystalline voice cold with contempt. "You have 1 hour to surrender the dragon, 1 hour to give up this foolish rebellion. After that, we will reduce your settlement to ash and glass. There will be no negotiations. There will be no mercy." In the settlement, chaos threatened to break out. Some refugees wanted to fight, others wanted to flee. Some suggested giving up to save themselves. Called a meeting in the central square. Every species was represented, every voice heard. The debate was fierce and fearful. Then stood up. "I am just a blacksmith," he said quietly. The crowd fell silent. "I do not know strategy or politics. I do not understand the great movements of history, but I know one thing." He pointed toward the mountain where waited. "That dragon spent 3,000 years in chains because he refused to kneel. 3,000 years of darkness and isolation, and he never gave up hope. He never stopped believing that someday someone would come." Looked at the faces around him. Human faces, alien faces, faces marked by fear and uncertainty. "We came, not because we were strong or clever or brave. We came because we crashed on a dead planet and found something impossible, and instead of running away, we decided to help." His voice grew stronger. "The Dominion has ruled through fear for They count on us being afraid, on us turning against each other, on us giving up when things get hard. But fear is not the only power in the galaxy. He held up his hands. I have broken 11 chains with these hands, chains that were supposed to be unbreakable. I did it because I refuse to accept that some things cannot be changed. I did it because helping someone who needs help is never wrong, no matter how impossible it seems. He turned to face the sky, where the Dominion fleet waited like a gathering storm. They have 30 ships. They have weapons that can destroy worlds. They have ruled the galaxy for longer than human civilization has existed, and they are terrified. A murmur ran through the crowd. They are terrified because we are still here, because we did not run, did not surrender, did not give up, because we looked at a chained dragon and saw a friend, because we are building something they cannot understand and cannot control. Smiled. So let them come. Let them bring their ships and their weapons and their threats. We will fight them, not because we think we can win, but because some things are worth fighting for even when victory is impossible. He looked at and all the others who had become his family. I would rather die free than live in chains, and I think everyone here feels the same way. The silence stretched on, then someone started clapping, then someone else. Within moments, the entire square was roaring with defiance. His voice cut through the noise, amplified by lungs the size of houses. Well spoken, Blacksmith, but I think you forgot something important. Turned, the dragon was emerging from the mountain and something was different. Something was wrong. No, not wrong. The last chain was gone. While you were giving speeches, said, flames dancing between his teeth, your clever engineer finished the job. Waved from the entrance to the forge. Her clothes were burned, her hair singed, but she was grinning like a maniac. Surprise, she called. Spread his wings. Fully free, fully restored, his power made the air itself tremble. Now then, the dragon said, turning his golden gaze toward the sky, let us show the Dominion what happens when you chain a dragon for 3,000 years. He launched himself into the air, and the war began. Admiral had hunted dragons all his life. He had studied their tactics, their weaknesses, their patterns of behavior. He had been there when was captured 3,000 years ago, a young warrior watching his elders bind the greatest predator the galaxy had ever known. He thought he understood dragons. He was wrong. Rose from like a living comet, fire trailing behind him in sheets of white and gold. 3,000 years of imprisonment had not weakened him. If anything, it had concentrated his power, compressed his fury into something, and more terrible than before. The first ship fired at him, did not dodge. He flew straight into the weapon's fire, letting it wash over his scales like warm rain. Then he opened his jaws and showed them what truly looked like. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, firing weapons and maintaining shields. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of vapor, molecules scattered across the void. All ships attack pattern Delta, screamed. Concentrate fire on the wings are vulnerable. 29 ships turned their weapons on a single target. The space around became a storm of energy beams and missiles and desperate violence. He burned through them like they were not there. Ship after ship fell. They were the greatest warriors the Dominion had ever produced, masters of combat who had conquered 100 species. Against a dragon unchained, they were nothing. But was not stupid. He knew he could not win this battle through firepower alone, so while his ships died, he sent a message. 10 fighters broke away from the main fleet. They did not attack the dragon. Instead, they dove toward the surface, toward the settlement where thousands of refugees huddled in fear. You want to save them, broadcast. Come and save them, beast, or watch them burn while you play in the stars. Heard the message. He saw the fighters streaking toward his friends. For a moment, rage consumed him. was using the same tactic the Dominion had always used, threatening the innocent to control the powerful, making him choose between victory and the people he cared about. 3,000 years ago, that tactic had worked, had surrendered to save a planet full of refugees, and they had chained him anyway, and killed everyone he tried to protect. But that was then. This was now. And now he was not alone. Ground defenses activated. They were crude things built from salvage and desperation, but they worked. 2 fighters fell to hidden missiles. 3 more were caught in a web of energy that had spent weeks preparing. Led a group of armed refugees against the remaining fighters that managed to land. They were outmatched, but they fought like people with nothing left to lose, because they were. And in the sky above, stopped holding back. He had been careful at first, using only enough power to destroy his enemies. But now, with threats echoing in his ears, something ancient and terrible awakened inside him. Dragons were not just creatures of fire. They were forces of nature given form. They were the universe's answer to tyranny, chaos incarnate, the living embodiment of freedom. Became that answer. His fire changed color. White became blue, then purple, then a shade that had no name in any language. Reality itself bent around him as he gathered power that had been sleeping for 3. No, whispered, watching from his flagship. That is not possible. We broke them. We killed them all. He cannot still have that power. But he did. Opened his jaws and the universe screamed. The blast was not fire. It was something older, something that predated stars. It struck flagship and did not stop. It continued through ship after ship, a lance of impossible energy that cut through the fleet like a blade through paper. 15 ships died in that single moment. 15 vessels crewed by thousands of warriors, reduced to scattered atoms in the blink of an eye. The survivors fled. Did not pursue them. He let them run, let them carry word of what had happened here. Let the Dominion know that their reign of fear was ending. He descended to the surface slowly, wings spread wide, fire dimming to gentle embers. The refugees watched him come, terror and wonder mixing in their eyes. Landed in the central square. His enormous body filled the space, his wings folded against his sides. For a long moment he simply stood there, breathing, existing, being free. Then walked up to him. The blacksmith was battered and bruised, his clothes torn from the fighting. But he was alive and he was smiling. "Nice fireworks," he said. Laughed. The sound shook buildings and made the ground tremble, but this time it was not frightening. It was joyful. "I may have been showing off a little." "A little." Perhaps more than a little. 3,000 years is a long time to wait for revenge. Nodded. "How does it feel? The revenge, I mean." Considered the question. He thought about all that he had killed, all the ships he had destroyed. He thought about the centuries of pain and isolation, the murder of his children, the slow death of hope. Empty, he admitted. Satisfying for a moment, but empty. They deserve to die, but killing them changes nothing. My children are still gone. My people are still dead. The past cannot be undone. Then what will you do now? The dragon looked around at the settlement, at the humans and aliens who had come together against impossible odds, at the forges and shelters and gardens that represented hope made real. "I think," he said slowly, "I will stay if you will have me." Stepped forward. "You saved us, you fought for us, of course we will have you." "I am a dragon. I am dangerous and unpredictable and very large. I will eat a great deal of your food and take up a great deal of your space." "We will manage." His golden eyes softened. "You humans are strange creatures." "So you keep saying." The weeks that followed were busy ones. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. More refugees came, then traders, then representatives of species who had long since given up on resisting the Dominion. They came to see the dragon who had broken his chains. They stayed because of the humans who had freed him. Became something new, not just a refuge but a symbol, a place where the impossible had happened, where chains had been broken and tyrants, a place where different species worked together, where freedom was not just a dream but a daily reality. Stayed true to his word. He guarded the settlement, told stories to the children, and occasionally reminded the Dominion that some prices were too high to pay. He became not a ruler but a friend, not a god but a neighbor, and kept his forge burning. One evening, years later, the dragon found the blacksmith sitting alone on the ridge above the settlement. The sky was clear, both moons visible, the stars bright and cold. "What are you thinking about?" asked, settling his massive body beside the small human. "The future," replied. "When we crashed here, I thought we were all going to die. Now look at us. A whole city down there, dozens of species living together, ships coming and going every day. We built something real." "You built it, you and your people." "We built it together. Dragons and humans and everyone else who was willing to try." Was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softly, his voice gentle as a whisper. "Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you, in the cavern all those years ago? That I was small. Yes, but also that you were the bravest creature I had ever met. You walked into a dragon's prison with a hammer and a smile, and you offered to break my chains. Not for reward, not for power, but because you thought it was right." Shrugged, "I am just a blacksmith." "No, you are the man who freed a dragon. You are the man who showed the galaxy that compassion is stronger than fear. You are the man who looked at an impossible task and simply started working." The dragon lowered his great head until his eye was level with his face. "I have lived for thousands of years. I have seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die. I have known kings and conquerors and gods, and I tell you truly, blacksmith, you are the best of them all." Felt his eyes grow wet. "You are going to make me cry." "Good, tears are nothing to be ashamed of." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Below them, the settlement glowed with life and light. Somewhere, children were laughing. Somewhere, friends were sharing a meal. Somewhere, someone was falling in love. It was thought a good world they had built. "Hey." "Yes." "Want to play cards? I think I can finally beat you." The dragon snorted. "You cheat." "Prove it." "I am a dragon. I do not need to prove anything." Sounds like something a sore loser would say. Growled, but there was no heat in it, just affection, deep and eternal. "Fine, one game, and when I win, you are making me dinner." "Deal." They walked back to the settlement together, the dragon and the blacksmith, the legend and the ordinary man who had changed everything by refusing to accept that some things could not be changed. Behind them, the stars continued their ancient dance. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Dominion's oldest leaders looked at their maps, at the growing light spreading from, and felt something they had not felt in. Fear. Not of dragons. Not of weapons. Of humans who looked at chains and saw only problems to be solved. Of compassion that could not be conquered. Of a simple blacksmith who had decided that everyone deserved to be free. The future was uncertain. More battles would come. More challenges would arise. But for now, on this night, under these stars, there was peace. And that was enough.